Yeah.
My number 3 is a game called Proxy Blade Zero on the Xbox 360. It's an indie game, and it's a very interesting, if also infuriating, indie game. It's made by a developer called Ben Grauer, who goes under the pseudonym Dragon 6, and there's some really decent music by an electronica group or an artist called Bolt in the Void. It's a reminder that XBlig or XNA, the development tool, is exactly like all other, any other console in that. Now that it's at the end of its natural life, people are really starting to do quite amazing things with it. And Proxy Blade Zero is a third-person action game, sort of focusing on melee combat, and it primarily involves you creating combos by bouncing in and out of this combat stance. And as you do that, you build up this overdrive meter. There's also a boost where you boost out of you sort of away from skirmishes by pressing the R trigger. You're this little kind of sort of knight, space knight, I suppose you'd call him. He looks like a knight, but he's also in space. But the right trigger sort of boost maneuver isn't much of an evasive maneuver, because you're basically, the problem with the game is that you're always locked into attacks. So as soon as you do them, you can't sort of bounce out of them by boosting with the R trigger. So it's better utilised merely to move through corridors sort of more quickly. And there's also a slight input delay when you hit the parry button, which is a big problem for a game like this, because a lot of the combat involves parrying a move and then retaliating to it. It's also, the game it's very simplistic. You're moving around. There's door keys. There's very straightforward switch puzzles, and they're not puzzles. You have to flick switches to open doors, and the AI just sort of strafe around you. So it's basically rooms full of enemies repeated, and there's also no way to earn health. So if you enter a new room with half a health bar or less, you might as well just suicide and start with it full, because you start in. If you die in a room, you start before it. So. There's just little problems with it like that, and also if you make a wrong turn, you're in trouble, because as good as it looks, everything looks the same. So if you double back on yourself and go into a room you've just come from by mistake, you have to fight the same enemies again, and it's guilty of terrible overkill, because it introduces a few needlessly difficult enemies, and they're hard mainly because they'll often only attack you if you attack them first, and once you've attacked them, you're locked into this hit animation that stops you from being able to dodge the retaliation of him. So it's quite frustrating at certain points. And then after you've fought a couple of these hard enemies, you'll kill one in a room, and then you'll progress further through the room, and there'll be another two, and you're just like, it's just too much.
Right.
Its primary sin is that it's yet another game in which there's an almost offensive obsession with providing quote unquote content. It's just it's one day someone is going to make a game like this that will last 20 minutes, and it will be a masterpiece, and it will change everything. But until that happens, we're stuck with a game that should cost 69p or so and last maybe 20 to 30 minutes. But instead, it costs £3.50, I think, and it's 2 to 3 hours long. But it's 2 to 3 hours long because the corridors are really long, and because the same enemies are used in 10 rooms instead of 2. So it's just like it's annoying, because my impressions of it were very positive, but the gameplay is not refined or sophisticated enough to be able to pull off difficulty that's in any way gratifying. It just becomes tiresome because you're trying to outsmart the game rather than sort of progress along with it. And I often get the sense that games that like this that are made really just obscenely difficult do so kind of in the misguided belief that it gifts them with a certain sense of personality, and I just that kind of sort of gets really, really old for me. It's a game that I think there's a lot to like about it. Basically, as a project, it's quite amazing, because games like this have only ever been made by huge teams. So to see the fact that one guy made this is amazing. Truly, and it's enjoyable for a stretch. It's just that when it gets more and more difficult, and you're doing the same thing over and over again, it's just too much. So I'd say it's on Steam Greenlight as well. So I'd say if you have an Xbox 360 that you're still prone to firing up now and again, download the trial at least, if only to look at, it's quite incredible that it's been made by one person. And it does work as well. The combat's problematic, but it does actually work. So, I'd say try the trial on 360, and also keep an eye on it, because it's on Steam Greenlight, and if and when it turns up on PC, I hope it's going to have been tinkered with a little bit further to sort of refine it a little bit more than it is now. So an interesting and frustrating game, and one that's potentially worth looking at, I think.